This happened in 2021. I was 20 at the time, and I had just got off work around 11 p.m. and went straight home to get ready to go out and meet my friend at the strip club. He messaged me to hang out and smoke, and I told him that I was meeting a friend and didn't want to hang out. So he offered to drive me to and from the strip club. Around 12:30, he came to pick me up and said he had to dump some garbage first. He had a couch on the back of the pickup truck, which I assumed was the garbage he was talking about. He said he made us margaritas, but I told him I didn't want to drink till I got to my destination, so we ended up just smoking marijuana on the way to dump the couch. It was about a 25 to a 30-minute car ride to where he wanted to dump the couch, and by the time we made it to the destination, it was about 1:15. There was logging road just off to the side of the highway that goes for miles. He pulled all the way down to the end and left the couch there, then got back into the truck and started driving back towards the highway. But once we got halfway back to the highway, he stopped and put his truck in park, then pulled out a pipe and started smoking more marijuana. After taking a hit, he turned his head to me and stared at me for a minute with a weird smirk on his face. Then all of a sudden, he almost looked like he wanted to jump at me, but stopped himself in the moment with his hands in a motion that he was about to grab me. I got scared at this point and was frozen in shock, not knowing if it was a joke or not. I quickly realized it was not a joke and opened my door like I was about to get out, and he did the same. I closed my door and he closed his too. We ended up playing door tag, and eventually he got tired of it and got out of the truck and ran to my side. He opened my door and tried pulling me out by my legs. As I was trying to kick him, I pulled my phone out to call the police, and of course my Face ID didn't want to work in that moment, and he ended up snatching the phone out of my hands. I kicked him hard enough in the chest and he flew backwards, falling to his butt. I grabbed my purse and hopped out the truck and started running toward the highway. I kept looking back to see how far behind me he was, and he gave me a head start before running after me, grabbing me by the back of my shoulders and forcefully throwing me into this ditch. I landed on my stomach with one leg straight out and the other one was bent at a weird angle. He sat on top of my legs and was holding my left hand behind my back. I screamed and begged him to bring me home and that I won't tell anyone. He got upset that I was screaming and tried suffocating me with his other hand while still holding my left hand behind my back. I kept trying to pull his hands off my face with my right hand because it got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Finally, he let go of my face, and I turned my head around to see what he was doing, and to my surprise, I watched him pull zip ties out of his front jean pocket. He zip tied my hands behind my back, then tried forcefully pulling my panties off of me. I had on a skirt and was still laying on my stomach. I remember digging my knees into the ground so he couldn't get them off. He didn't. He got up and started pacing, saying, "It shouldn't have happened this way, just do what I say." I cried, telling him if he was going to do anything to me. He then put me back into the truck, and he did. I'm not going to go into detail about this part of the story, but what I did notice was he pulled out a really small Ziploc baggie out of his jean pocket and pulled out a condom. He took the condom out of the actual wrapper it came in and put it in a really small Ziploc baggie. I asked him what it was and he said,
"It's for protection."
After all that went down, he got back in the truck, mind you I'm still tied up, and he drove back to the highway and started driving around. I made up every excuse to get him to take them off and he wouldn't. I asked for a cigarette, and he lit one, smoked on it a bit, then held it to my mouth saying,
"I'll hold it for you."
At this point I thought to myself, what can I do to get myself out of this situation? I thought I was gonna die. I started saying things like, "You can be my sugar daddy, and I will pay to take us out to dinner tomorrow if is all you wanted from me. You could have just said that." He loved it so much, he started saying he will put me on his life insurance policy so when he dies I can get the money. Eventually, I asked him again if he would take the zip ties off. They were on so tight it was cutting my circulation. He pulled to the side of the road and pulled out a mini pocket knife from his car keys and cut them off from me. It took a few tries because of how tight they were and gave me my phone back. I had an Apple Watch on my wrist and asked him for it after noticing it wasn't on my wrist anymore. And he had this surprised look on his face and said, "We need to go back and get it." He turned around and headed back to where all that just happened at. I got so scared and thought to myself, "Yep, this is it. I'm going to die tonight and nobody will know until somebody finds my dead body." He told me to stay in the truck and he got out and searched the ditch for my watch. He came back to the truck after 5 minutes and said he couldn't find it, but it will be back in the morning to look when it's light outside. We got back on the highway and headed back to town. Once we got into town, he asked me, "What do you want to do now?" I said, "Bring me to my mom's house. I have to work in 4 hours and I'm tired." It was about 4:30 by this time. He brought me to my mom's. After getting to my mom's house, I looked up for his name on Google and he was on parole for first-degree murder. He had served 17.5 years in prison for murdering somebody for their life insurance policy. I'm 22 now, and I'm so thankful I got to see another day. I was subpoenaed to testify against him, and he was found guilty November 6, 2023 of all the charges. As of now, he hasn't been sentenced yet. So this happened years ago when I was a dumb teen girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe in a city with a tramway station. On this one night, I sat in a train station waiting to catch the last train home. 3 trains stopping at this station, 2 of which went where I was going, important info for later. And as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quietly walking up and standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just someone else waiting for the train, until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark, and there was no one else in sight, just me and this guy. And I started wondering why he chose to stand this close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anyone else wanting to socialize this late at night, given that I'm not very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink it. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall and built like a bear, big belly, big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It was the fact that he was staring right at me, unblinking and expressionless. Not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed. No. This guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky, cold shivers down my spine. This was not normal. I realized quickly that I was not in a good situation. I couldn't miss the last train. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid, and didn't have what it takes to scare this guy away. I knew that, but I at least had to try. I only managed to utter a small "hi," trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking. But my attempt failed in the face of his silent, threatening aura. He kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside me, I told myself to stay calm and think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me? Minutes passed, his stare continued to burn on my skin, and there was no train in sight. Ignoring him didn't work. So I mustered the courage to speak once again, this time louder. "What do you want? Stop staring." No answer. He definitely heard me this time. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that this behavior didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to start thinking. I know what I can't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there's nothing I can say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew that they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up to me before I can tire him out, since his legs were much longer than mine. Even if I managed to somehow lose him, walking home through dark alleys past the junkies and gypsies that were always prowling about could land me in an even worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might feel compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So what can I do? The only thing I could realistically be able to do was to try and outsmart him somehow. So I started developing a few plans, depending on which tram showed up, trying to confirm whether he was just amusing himself and actually waiting for a tram too, or popped over for another, more suspicious reasons, and whether I can get any kind of help. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I'd have to be prepared to employ whatever strategy available, and for that, I needed to stay rational, aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was one I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the depot right in my neighborhood, forcing me to lead him into my home. I hoped he would board it and leave me be, but he didn't. He kept watching me carefully. I let the train go, desperately hoping it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things are going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could now pretend that I needed the other train, the one going to a different area of the city, and just ride to the next station, getting off as soon as possible so I don't end up too far and miss the train I need. This train showed up next. With my heart in my throat, I boarded it and sat down by the door. He got onto it too, but sat by himself in the back, pretty far from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking this still might go well. When the train reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back and hoping it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the train drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly and was terrified to see him walking towards me. Looking slightly pissed off, he stopped just a few steps away and resumed staring, this time with a clean air of malice, still in silence. My vision blurred as I fought back tears of despair. He was not going to let me go. The helplessness I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry, I couldn't give up, I had to find a way. I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now, if I didn't, was becoming too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets, and horrible scenarios. I wanted to badly to not to have to think this anymore, to not have to fight back the tears and stay composed. But I know this would be his cue to enact whatever fucked up plan he had in mind. I couldn't let it happen. Then I saw the final tram approach, the only one I could take now, and got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me to. When I was in, bright lights enveloping me, my mind snapped out of its nightmarish spiral of fear and allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down in the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. We passed one stop. There was no one else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around fully expecting to see that the psycho had followed me again, but I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He was not taking any chances. He was making sure I won't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposely walked over to another seat in the middle of the tram car. I wanted to make it clear, I would not put up with this BS any longer. He got up too, and slowly walked up to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonally from me, then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shot up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he won't have any idea which station I plan to get off at. He remained where he was this time, convinced that I was bluffing. After all, This was really the last train. There was nothing else I could possibly do to escape now. He must have reckoned, so my defiance was just a funny act to him. This was my chance. I had to take the risk. It had to work. There were 3 doors on the train, and they all opened and closed at the same time, and stayed open for around 5 seconds before closing again, if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The train showed to a stop. The doors opened. I made no move. 5 long seconds passed. The door started to close. I bolted out and ran for it, reaching the back door as fast as I could, and slamming the button to open it again. My whole body tensed with adrenaline. I waited a long, painful second and jumped back in, keeping my head low, holding my breath, and crouching behind the nearest seat. I shut my eyes tightly and exhaled slowly while thanking the gods I didn't believe in for that button working, and wishing with all my might for him to not have seen me before I got back in. As I was waiting to hear his footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the train, face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station, mad-eye searching in darkness for me? As the train continued its loud journey, banging and clanging in sync with my heartbeat, I dared smile to myself, imagining his face when he realized he fucked up. Hand on my chest, I did my best to stealthily look around the corner and found no one looking back. I stood up in excitement and threw myself at the foggy back window. There he was, standing alone and victimless on that slowly fading out of sight station, watching me leave him and his vile plans behind. Giving someone the middle finger never felt so good. I made it home and told no one my story for fear I'd be admonished for my naivety, but I was still safe. I was proud of myself and I learned my lesson. Creepy stranger, I hope the events of that day taught you not to underestimate girls and prevented you becoming a criminal for the rest of your life. One late night around 3 a.m., I was sitting at my home on PC watching movies and playing games, when I noticed I'm out of cigarettes. The only thing that works late at night is our local gas station not too far from my home, but still it's easier to go with car. I took my car keys and locked my house and I went to the gas station. I live in a small European country, which is the most safe country on the planet. Still, that doesn't mean that some bad things don't happen here and there. When you exit from a suburban area where I live, you need to take a right so you can take the main road. After that, you just go straight for about half kilometer and then go left for another half kilometer to get to the gas station. Halfway, and I noticed some girl on the sidewalk. I usually drive slower at night because at that time a lot of people would speed and go on red during at night. She was walking faster than usual. It looked like she panicked and I noticed 2 guys behind her who were like 10 feet away, maybe less, pointing at her and do some hand gestures towards her. They gave me a very creepy vibe. As I was getting close to the girl, I noticed she had a scary face on like she was about to cry but didn't cry. So I pulled over close to her and said very quietly, "Are you in trouble?" And she just looked at me and nodded with head nodding. I told her to get in the car and she did. I told her I'm going to the gas station to get some cigarettes, but I will take her home as soon as I finish buying the cigarettes. She thanked me for like 100 times, and I asked her if she wanted to go report it to police, but she said only to take her home. I went to the gas station and bought me cigarettes and a bottle of water for her. She was clearly in fear, and I took her home after that. We passed the same street where those 2 guys followed her, but those guys are never to be seen.